This is AI Governance with Dr. Freddie Seba, a podcast and practical guide to AI oversight for boards and executive leadership.
Welcome to AI Governance with Dr. Freddie Seba, where we discuss with real practitioners of AI about their experiences and what they can tell the rest of us. We try to focus on practical guide to AI oversight, especially for leadership, boards, trustees. And the idea is to focus on AI governance and ethics given the growth environment, and we try to make it real, both impactful and plain language. This is not technical, so this is for leaders and for all of us to understand how these practitioners are doing AI these days. So we're very pleased to have in this episode as a guest speaker Victor Chapela. He's a serial entrepreneur with a long and successful career. And his thinking is making AI the reality layer, optimizing for model speeds, efficiency, and trustworthiness. With that, let's welcome Victor. Victor, thank you again for your time. I know you're a busy man, companies, startups, speaking engagement, traveling. So again, we really appreciate you. So can you please tell us a brief uh, intro on AI governance and what are you thinking these days and what are the challenges?
So, first of all, thank you for the invite, Freddie. It's wonderful to be here with you today. And um, so, what is AI? I think that I will be very contrarian. I think that the AI that we've built so far simply will not take us to where we expect and want it to be. And I will deeply dig into what has gotten us here and what are the differences of what will fundamentally change AI going forward. And I think that the main problem, just to put it in a nutshell, we've always thought of AI or intelligence as a CPU, as a processor. And for a decade, we've built on this AI in this flawed assumption that intelligence is like computation. If we build a better processor and we scale it up, and intelligence will just follow. But if you think of it from life's perspective, intelligence has always been something else entirely. It's like life is continuously adapting to its environment. It's learning what to expect. It's forming relationships that deepen over time. And processors don't know anyone. They compute, they reset, they compute again. There's no memory of before or after, or there's no sense of what is coming next. And adaptation, which is what real intelligence really was built to allow for, is knowing where you've been, where you're going, and having this discernment of knowing what matters now. So it requires both state and it requires relevance. And I would argue that we live in a stateless crisis. We built AI that is stateless. It doesn't know what is happening. Every single time you chat with it, it's trying to figure it out again. And I think that we're moving, and that's what I will argue, and that's what we're building, into a stateful kind of AI compute, where AI will be able to understand where it is in this procession of before and after. It will be able to understand exactly what it needs to provide to be most valuable. And interestingly enough, I will dig into why that is much more energetically efficient, computationally efficient, faster, and much more aligned with what we really want intelligence and AI to be.
Excellent. Thank you. So, can you tell us more about yourself? I mean, I've been very, in full disclosure, I'm very privileged to have known you for many years, very privileged to have worked with one of your startups and been advisors of other startups. And I'm very privileged of brainstorming with you all the time with technology, with changes in policy, with applicability. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you in my show, because I think leadership, trustees, board members would benefit of knowing somebody like you and being able to tap into your the richness of your knowledge, not only on the theoretical side but also on applicability. So, can you walk us through your entrepreneurial life and all the fun stuff you've done? So, just to give context to leadership.
Sure. I've like it is, I think, a typical serial entrepreneur kind of story where you have ups and downs. I've started my first startup when I was 15. And in my early 20s, I already was basically had over 300 employees processing information for 80% of the banks in Mexico, Colombia, Brazil. And from there, I really something very interesting in this case is that I got fascinated by AI very early on. So in 1999, we were raising money toward an AI company, and we had a very good early success in raising money. And then the dot-com bubble burst, and AI never was what we needed it to be. Let's put it that way. And we were building more of a Siri kind of infrastructure at the time. And after that big struggle of we ended up closing the company, which was, and I think that's a matter for a different podcast, but I think that the process, emotional process of being an entrepreneur is fascinating. And that was one of the hardest moments of my life. At the same time, I think it's what you learn the most from. And as time progressed, I've started more companies. I've sold 3 in total, and been working in everything from AI and fintech, also in health and wellness. That is some of where we met. And I think that all of these different aspects have always had, since 1999 to date, a strong AI piece of it. And that strong AI piece has converted into fraud detection systems, or systems to an app to read a menu and tell you what you could or could not eat, long before AI was popular. However, the main difficulty has always been, AI is very clear. If we can emulate intelligence, and intelligence is so valuable, it will have a lot of value for the economy, for companies, for individuals. However, I think that we've emulated a part of our intelligence, a single piece, which is what I would call the CPU. Like the CPU we have, like the large language models basically kind of do that for us, but they don't quite work in full intelligence mode, allowing us to completely delegate what we need and completely do things that we would expect them to do. And that is what I'm working on next. And that has completely changed. So in a way, my trajectory has been building companies in the tech space, mostly in AI. I've tried different industries. And I think that finally, and it was a little bit by chance, I've ended up square into AI again. And it was like, and you know a little bit about the story, but it's been completely, I did not expect it. And it's been a fascinating ride in the last few weeks to just see how something that was more of a hobby became what is going to be potentially my biggest company yet.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And this is a very useful background there for our audience. So, Victor, in terms of AI, and you've been at this for many, 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 many years, more than most people in the industry. What keeps you up at night in the context of AI governance and ethics, having seen the trajectory and how fast it's moving these days?
Um, I think in terms of governance and ethics, I believe that we have a my goodness.
It is a challenging question.
I
So,
know, and I think that from a governance, from like a board perspective, what you realize is that a lot of what the board is trying to do is maximize growth, minimize risk. That's basically, and that's what life is trying to do. By the way, that is a fundamental part of what life and actually growth. I'll get into that detail afterwards. But the main point is what we're trying to do is how do we help the institutions bring in more employees, bring in more customers, grow the stability. And if you think about it, a company fundamentally what it tries to do is understand and predict its environment, like the market, the customers, the providers, suppliers, employment, regulations, etc. And the better you can predict your environment, you can extract work from the environment. You can extract money from the environment, and you can put, and the better, the more efficient you are using that money, the more you can reinvest into continuing to build parallel abilities. So really in governance, what you're trying to do for the organization is help it navigate and predict and guide it toward those things that are more lucrative. At the same time, try to keep it out of trouble. And ethics is a very interesting part because ethics, I think, is subjective. There is no objective ethics of any kind. What is perfectly valid in one country can be invalid in others, and what is ethical for one person can be unethical for another one. So you end up in a place where ethics means really what other people expect from you. So let me bring this all down into a very interesting concept that I think that fundamentally at the core of everything that happens in AI and companies, it's the same thing. We're trying to predict the world. And the better we can predict the world, the more revenue we can bring in, the better we can predict the type of revenue and the alignment with my inner processes, the more efficient my processes will be and my services or products will be delivered, and the more profit I will have. The more profit I have, the more complexity, the more I can grow the company, and the more new revenue streams that I can go after. So in a way, it's a process that is extremely similar to how life grows. And so life itself is trying to optimize the same thing. Instead of money, it's energy in the form of chemical gradients. But at the end of the day, it's trying to extract from the environment through food, through like the nutrients it needs to stay alive and to maintain its internal order and grow in the form of replication of the cells into a larger organism and then replicate into a second organism. And all that, what it's doing is preserving order at the opposite end of entropy. And entropy basically is the same for, and it's this tendency to disorder, to this randomness where a company doesn't survive, a living entity doesn't, or a living organism doesn't survive. So what we're trying to do in a way is give birth to these companies or maintain these companies alive in their environment. And what they need to do is adapt to the environment. So what is AI helping us and allowing us to do? And it will actually accelerate into the future is better predict the environment in which we were in. And already there's a lot of algorithms helping us understand sales, understand providers, and like there's a point in which nobody can have in their mind, in their single mind, or even in a collection of minds, you don't have the information of what is happening. Computers have already allowed us in many ways to extend our prediction capabilities, to understand longer time frames, to understand detailed nuances, and not understand but predict those things over time. And that has allowed companies to grow even larger and to cater to even more customers that smaller non-technological companies could do. So what AI does is it will allow us to go even further in that ability, because if you think about it, there's a natural reflection of how this all works into a nested hierarchy. So in the same way, life has a hierarchy that starts with the mitochondria and the nucleus inside of cell, and then the cells form a tissue, and then the tissue an organ, then a system, then a full body. In the same way, a company has employees that are doing tactical work and doing things. And then as you go up the hierarchy in a company, all the way into the board, every layer up is a layer of organization that abstracts the layers below, predicts a longer time horizon, and allows it to also understand and buffer uncertainty. Because now you can sum up the different parts, the different salespeople into a sales unit, and understand that those fluctuations they're seeing are really fluctuations that happen every year, or not. Or you can actually, as it goes, as that information moves up the chain, you could actually understand that something is wrong, because at this time of year we should be selling more or less, and that surprise in a system allows the system to refocus, to basically get more aligned. So if you don't mind, let me step back one step to make all of this understandable, why I'm talking about life in the middle of this whole these whole ideas. So one of the things that happened, and this is the story of why I'm here talking with you about this new company. So as I built my startups on my hobby, or I would say it's a hobby, but
Or passion. Let's call
my
it passion.
passion,
Your passion.
that's perfectly
Yes.
correct. Yes. I like 15 years ago, I started writing a book on, and we called it Risk Evolution. And the idea of that book that we were writing was that evolution was on the opposite side of entropy, and that what evolution in life we're really doing is mitigating the risk of staying alive, and mitigating risk through replication, through different types of redundancies, through different types. But that was the origin story. As I continued to research into that, I got into the physics and information theory, and it turns out that after a lot of work with some of the top scientists in the field, we realized that there is a way to combine information theory, which is basically what underlies artificial intelligence, with physics, thermodynamics, and and we understood that it was two sides of the same coin. As you were optimizing to minimize surprise in the world as a living organism or as a company, you were at the same time minimizing energetic use. And that was extremely interesting, because what we're saying is the better you can predict the world, the more efficient you will be. And the more efficient you will be is only possible if you continue to predict the world better. So this insight, we started creating a derivation from first principles of a series of actually papers that will be coming out in the next few months. And these papers, the foundations paper was, how does this, what are the equations behind this? What are the relationships between energy, heat, thermodynamics, and information? And it turns out that life is extremely efficient in terms of energetic usage. It is like the mitochondria or a neuron, etc. They're in many ways working next to the foundational, like the physics limits of energy production. And they do so while maintaining information carefully. So you want to be very efficient in energy consumption, and you want to be very efficient in energy and information conservation. So one of that is the nucleus of the cell. It's trying to maintain the DNA and the epigenetics of that DNA intact. At the same time, the mitochondria is trying to process, and it creates all these free radicals and oxidative stress, but it stays mostly within the mitochondria. So the mitochondria are being replaced daily, and you have 1,000 mitochondria in the cell creating energy in a very efficient way and dying off very quickly because they get all bombarded internally by this entropy that is coming from energy production. So, and you're separating that in the cell. So from the cell going up, it's always about how do you get energy production in the best and most efficient way possible, and how do you maintain structure and information without it getting degraded by entropy itself. And it's the same thing at a company. You want your processes and procedures trying to get things as aligned as possible with minimizing risks, maximizing opportunity. But then the environment is changing. So every time the environment changes because of regulation change, because you have a new competitor, because the economy is down, everything that changes outside requires your company to adapt. And it has to adapt, but to adapt, there's two things that need to happen. First, you need to have enough profit left over, enough reserves to adapt your business. Because you have to reinvest that in learning and changing, and that can be myelinization of a neural circuit, or it can be the epigenetics themselves of expressing a new gene. All of that is very expensive energetically. So you need to have those reserves. But at the same time, you want to maintain those things you've learned and not get rid of them. So a lot of that gets implemented into software, gets implemented into the policies and procedures, it gets implemented, and you're trying to prevent bad things from happening.
Thank you, Victor. I like the fact that, I mean, you talk about complex systems, and I like how you go very smooth between, talking about AI, and talking about the human body and kind of mixing and talking about companies and how all these complex systems interact and what we can learn from it. So, as a board, with that on mind, what use cases would you think, or should they use with your analogies with the product that you're building now and this new startup of yours? They think about, workflows. I mean, where do I start? Because now have this complex corporation, these complex body systems, again, corporations. Where do I start? I mean, what's the best use case to engage with this technology if I were a board or leadership?
So let's think of it this way. First, everything we do is a prediction as a company, and it's different layers of prediction. And think of it as a nested hierarchy. So there's the prediction of the individual salesperson, the prediction of the sales unit, the prediction of the chief revenue officer, the prediction that gets to the CEO, the prediction that goes to the board, and the prediction you tell the markets, and the prediction the markets have on that prediction. And it's all about a prediction of what others expect and what people inside of the organization expect. So AI, what it's very good is at certain types of prediction. So, and I'm not talking about LLMs. LLMs are actually not as good as other models for complex predictions. And LLM is very good at predicting what sequence of words answers a particular question, but it doesn't really predict what is happening. So I'll answer your question in two different ways. One is, with available AI, what is the best use of AI currently? And then I'll go a little bit into what it is that I've been building and why.
Great.
And with this new type of AI that we will enable, how could that actually help organizations? So in the first piece, like today, what we have is different models, and each model is good at predicting different things. So you could have a model that is predicting your sales and your sales forecast and your pipeline. And that model in itself allows you to make decisions about what to spend on, what to invest on, and how much reserves you need. And all those models are really, and we know those predictions. If you're a financial company, you have predictions on the money you've lent or the money that you'll receive. If you're and that you can have predictions that are very short term, like in milliseconds, if this is fraud or not. Or you can have long-term predictions of, will this new pharma product be sellable in the market or not once we go through all the clinical trials. So those different time frames of prediction, there are different models that are best or not. And if you think about LLMs are not particularly very good at any new type of prediction. What they're very good at is predicting a series sequence of words. So currently, in the current form and shape, they've proven to be very good for software development, because that's a sequence of words. And if you get the right sequence of words in a programming language in the right way, you can basically build things, and it can extrapolate or make developers much faster. We're getting to a point in which some agents are working good enough to automate looking at some of my stuff and responding. I've been, I think I know I'm one of the heaviest AI users. Like OpenAI gives you like a statistic just this year, and I'm in the top 1%. And I think for something, I don't remember what it was.
I'm not surprised, Victor.
0.01% of users. And I'm using, and just to be clear, I'm using all models simultaneously. So I use ChatGPT Pro and Gemini 3 and Grok and Claude and others, because I also have my open router and I use all different, I test different models. So I think I may be interacting with AIs more than I interact with people. That's basically, I think that's perfectly reasonable. Yeah, no, not reasonable, but perfectly accurate. I must be interacting with AIs like 10 hours a day.
That's why we wanted to have you here. So where do I focus as a leader, as a board? I said, all these workflows, all these needs, all competing with each other. What framework? Or maybe, the thing is, what framework do I use to choose? Because we got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, I'll just wait to give you the conclusion of what I'm doing afterwards. I'll try to answer first this other question. So I think there's two different things that you can use. So you can use AI to automate processes, and right now you can do the customer service more or less, and you can do software development, and you can do these things. And it's just like cost reduction if you think about it. But really it's not, and there's a lot of work going into marketing and emails, and that is also working. So you can bring in some new sales by using this, but then you can also reduce some costs by using AI in its current form. But it's not transformative. As we just, that is going to basically allow your company to have a better profit. And yes, I think that we can use AI to increase our profit margin, our bottom line. And that is good. That's a good outcome for almost any company, like reduce costs, increase revenue. but it's going to be in the single digit percentages. I don't think that any large company will have a 2x or 10x return from current AI. Now, I think that most of what we're seeing in large corporations is not this is what I just said, which is like this incremental innovation. Every single IT department is trying to do something with AI, or put in developers, or put in customer service, or put in something in and using it. So I think that is already being done, and we don't need to talk much about that. I think there's another aspect of it, which is that I don't know what I don't know about AI. I know how the internet killed many companies and created many new ones. I know how mobile phones, when they became small computers, killed a bunch of others, and the personal computer before that. So every one of these technology waves is like a meteorite that kills dinosaurs. Like a lot of companies cannot survive the shift in consumer behavior, the shift in regulations, the shift in competitive pressures. And I think that that is what most boards are really afraid of. It's not how do I optimize a little part of my business to have an extra 3% profit next year. That even though that's good, and it could double the profit for some companies that have very narrow margins, but it's not like if they're going to die, they're going to die even with that extra 3% profit.
How about risk? I mean, boards are concerned about, I mean, you talk about risks inheriting to losing customers, to losing sales, to changing.
Okay,
But
so
how about the risk of these technologies that is embedded from within? I mean, there we are picking one of these workflows, as you say, IT groups are trying to bring innovation. So, but how do boards think about those governance, given your experience and given what you're building now? So, how do we go about those risks?
so look, I think the way I think about risk, having been in information security for many years, and is you have um, mainly two types of risk, I would say. One is life-threatening risk from a company perspective, like this, if this materializes, it could kill the company, kind of thing. Um, and evidently, you need to deal with those. And I don't think AI in and of itself creates any of those risks for a company, like implementing AI. And then there's other risks that are, and I would put the other risks in the form of this will decrease the adaptedness of the company in the future. So it will reduce our revenue, and we will have a tough time. And yes, I think that from that perspective, that risk is clear. It's going to reduce. And then there's a third type of risk. Let's just put it out there, which is regulatory risk, lawsuits risk, which is kind of like an indirect risk of, but even that is a moving target. Those risks, the new government can change the regulations on us, and new regulation can make things that were ethical under the other be unethical under the new regulation, and we've seen that recently. So it's basically, I think that trying to, and we have no way to predict what will happen 3 years from now in the next election, or with a new regulator, and you can have some idea of what they're trying to do or not. But I think that for a board is which things will kill us. And yes, we and I don't think AI is in that category. I think that there's other things that kill a company faster than implementing or not implementing AI. And I think that what is truly a risk currently, which is what most boards and CEOs and large companies are trying to mitigate, is the adaptedness of their company in the new environment. And why is that? Because there are business models that will be able to emerge that are purely AI led. What I mean by that is instead of employees, you have a bunch of servers in the server room. And I would argue that that change is so profound that very few companies will be able to transition. So if we have a completely new type of company like Amazon versus Walmart, what Amazon sells today, there's completely, or even Walmart, like all the small mom and pop shops, like it really destroyed a big part of the economy, or by just growing into the, and it couldn't have been prevented. It wasn't about these companies getting a better website. It wasn't about that. There was other fundamental network effects that were available to Amazon given the specific nature of the internet that allowed them to have an infinite catalog. And that is something that an infinite catalog that allowed it economies of scale, that allowed it to have delivery that was unmatched by any other company out there. So what are those type of network effects? What are those type of new business models or new possible so yes, you will have companies that will be completely AI driven, probably a CEO or an owner, and there's a bunch of AIs doing everything. Can you compete against that? Most likely not, because that will allow them to have higher margins and do things that you can't do if you have to pay salaries and insurance and all the other extra and offices. And so once you completely change the economics of a company, it's completely unfair for the existing companies that are trying to adapt. Now, I wouldn't, is there something you can do as a board member toward that? No. I don't think that you can reinvent the company and fire everyone and replace everyone with AI. So if we go to that point, I think that something I like about Jeff Bezos said many years ago, that many people ask what is changing. However, very few people ask what is not changing. And I think that what really boards and companies should be looking at is what is not going to change in the future, even when AI is available. And that has to do with, and I would argue, human interactions. And everywhere where human interactions add value, as opposed to our friction, it's like I was once in Japan, and we went to one of these restaurants where you have a screen and you just click on things and the food arrives and you pay in the same screen. I didn't like it at all. It was like, yes, it was super efficient. It's probably they get another 5-10% margin because they don't have waiters, but it was a horrible experience. I like interacting with a waiter. I like interacting with a chef. I like interacting with whoever I can. It's not a transactional thing. So once you understand that and you're willing to pay 20-30% more to interact with humans, which is what we do every time we go to a restaurant, we are paying a tip to that human for interacting. Otherwise, we just get it delivered to our home.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. I mean, you're kind of nailing one by one intentionally. Like human in the loop is important. This is a partnership tool. This is not to disintermediate. Yes, it's good to cut costs, but at some point there's not much you can do with costs. So you're bringing some of the issues of hallucinations. This is a tool that, especially LLMs, that not always get it right. Most of the time gets it right. So, and yes, you're saying, look, boards and leaders need to engage with this technology. You cannot ignore it because, competition is engaging with it, and there are going to be companies with business models that we cannot even imagine that are going to come. So that I do appreciate. So how do they go about governing that? Because as you know, my thinking is if we don't govern AI, AI is going to govern us. So how, as a board, as a leader, as an investor, you interact a lot. You've very successfully raised tons of rounds of money, and you've done well to your investors and your stakeholders and your clients. How do you govern this technology? What's the framework?
And again, I think that up to today, governance of AI is just like any other tool, and that is changing. But up to today, like if I were to say right now, do I have a different type of governance toward I would just say this tool allows us to reduce these costs, increase this thing, and it has this risk because there's another type of risk, which is reputational risk, which
Mhm.
you've kind of alluded to. And reputational risk is there, but reputational risk can happen because the CEO just said the wrong thing to a reporter, or because you get hacked, and then reputational risk is your information is lost, and then people don't want to be with your company because their medical information was lost. So reputational risk has multiple avenues through which it can harm you, and having an AI say the wrong thing is not a big problem. Um, even like think about it today. There's even lawsuits around reputational risk for a lot of AI companies, and they're still around. It's they're worth 10 times more than when the lawsuit happened. Like it's not like affecting the value perception of the companies at all. And I do believe though that there is going to be a risk, but the risk has to do more with um when when I was building my company in 1999 and raising a lot of money, everyone wanted to invest. We actually had to say no to certain investors because we didn't need more money, we didn't want more money. And and then a year later, once the internet had crashed, nobody wanted to give you money. Nobody wanted, even our customers. We had letters of intent of Citigroup and of First Data, um, and we couldn't get them to honor their letters of intent because now the person who had actually signed the letter of intent had left, and now it was like, and anything internet was bad, and anything like that was the kind of time we were living in. So we can very quickly go from AI is good to AI is bad, and that is but we can't really manage that risk. How do we manage a risk of everyone saying AI is bad, and if you have AI, we don't buy from you? Because that will happen soon, where a company that has AI customer service will be kind of not used by people who are against AIs, or has robots delivering food. They will say, oh, we won't be using robot taxis or robot delivery food because we're taking away jobs. There's going to be a backlash. Now, you can there are companies that are taking the stance of we are AI free, and that is a stance. And if you are on the right side of that bet, I think that those companies that have a human element, like for instance, uh, artists in a marketplace, and then the marketplace says we don't have any more AI. You can't put anything here that is not. Um, then that basically protects that marketplace from AI, and it allows the community to flock there because other marketplaces may end up allowing for the sale, or even they are selling AI images that are trained with the images of everyone that used to use that marketplace. So it's kind of, it will happen that very soon we will see the AI versus no AI kind of thing. And I think that that is something to be aware of. It will happen. I don't think there's any way it won't. But then again, it can happen and you can still end up using AI-based services, even if you want it or not. The other thing that I find interesting is sometimes AI has been around for a long time. And the most incredibly successful uses of AI or machine learning, we don't even think of them as machine learning. Like Google, like you use Google every day. It's one of the most, it's a beautiful algorithm or group of algorithms. And we've used it without ever wondering that it's an AI behind it. It's very different type of AI to the ones that we're interacting with today, but it's still an algorithm that is pretty clever. And I think that once it gets embedded into our day to day, we stop thinking Alexa was an AI, and we used it, and it was super dumb. That was a bad one. But in a way, we are accustomed to using AIs for a long time, and we expect from AIs more than what we would expect from an app or even a human. And the reality is that if we can integrate AI without it being the center focus of attention, it can actually provide a lot of value without having a backlash.
Yeah,
Because
I agree. I agree with you. And I especially in the context when we're recording this show, I mean, there's a lot of talk about it's going to be another, bust of the AI bubble, and they're concerned about valuations dropping and company disappearing. But those of us who have been here before, I mean, yes, there was the internet bubble, but yes, bunch of companies, as you mentioned, disappear. There was a lot of value destruction. But look, the companies, there are a lot of good companies that came out of that. We use, as you mentioned, AI has been normalized, the internet has been normalized, the bandwidth, all of these still with us. And I do agree and share with you the fact that yes, we might be in front of internet bubble on valuations and what have you, but technology is going to be there, and we're already using it every time we watch, we watch Netflix or what have you. The AI is helping us every time we shop at Amazon or what have you. So AI is part of our life. Hence, we need to figure out how to use it, where to use it, move away from the hype. I'm with you. So, with that as a context, I'm very excited about what you're building, and I don't know how much you're willing to share with us, but I guess I was basically impressed the way you're thinking about efficiency, but also governance in the context of algorithms doing what algorithms should be doing, and humans doing what humans should be doing, and being able to kind of have an abstraction layer on some of the models that are out there and that you believe in. Again, I'm not sure how much you can share. Um, and I'm very respectful of you not sharing that much. And I would love to have you back in the show as soon as you're live and you can talk more about it. Because I'm sure as the policy in AI technology keeps evolving, you and I are going to have a very interesting conversation in a few months. But to the extent that you could share, can you tell us how you conceptualize that
okay,
layer?
so let me um, give you a little bit of the origin story. So I mentioned briefly at the start of this show that I I had been doing a lot of first principle mathematical derivations on the physics and information theory, and combining those. We basically found a way to combine those two things. We were working, or we are working on a series of papers that we were going to publish. And what happened is, as part of that, we created a toy model, software to prove these concepts. and we tested it against one of the benchmarks. And this is a benchmark for very long context models. Like, so you see, and normally what happens is once you go over 100,000 tokens, all the models go down and lose all the context and basically start responding the wrong things. And what happened to us is we ran this with tokens, and it wouldn't. We were on 100% precision. We went through the 100,000. We went through the 200,000 tokens. We went through 1 million tokens. We got to 10 million tokens, and it never reduced. And we were like, this must be wrong. So we ran it again. We had the same result. And it was like, okay, so we have something here. We ran it against 10 different benchmarks, and we beat every single high reasoning model in every single, like, by a lot. And so we had to stop and say, like, this is more than just a benchmark. This like, we were doing it to include it in our paper, but now that we had something that is superior, we were like, why is this? Why are we so superior? And so let me try to explain how. So I mentioned that we are conceiving large language models more as a processor, like a CPU. And the reality is that a CPU has two things. It doesn't have memory. It has very short-term memory that it uses, which would be like the context window of a LLM. And as it's learning about something, it basically forgets what happened before. And that's like exactly the same as a CPU. So think of what we're doing as a contextual OS. So we call it context OS. And context OS is basically a context layer that makes AI stateful. So right now, all of the AI that we have forgets every time we talk to it. It makes it stateful if we can keep that state over time, and it makes it relevant. That state has to be relevant. And relevancy it's shockingly not about RAG. It's not about creating a hard drive with a lot of information. It's actually the opposite. It's just taking and learning from those things that are most relevant. And so basically the way life has solved for this is everything that is predictable has little to no information. So if I give you an answer that is a perfect answer as an LLM to you, Freddie, and that was a perfect answer for you, there would be no information for the LLM to learn. But if I give you an answer that is perfectly wrong, it's actually the opposite of what you wanted, then the LLM could learn, oh my goodness, Freddie wants something different. Now, let me put this as an example. Like, let's say my son, he's 25 years old, and he comes and tells me, hey, actually, before I go to my son, let's say someone I don't know, another 25-year-old, comes over and tells me, hey, I just got a job offer. Should I accept it? The first thing I would do is try to learn more about him or her. Like, it's like, what do you do? What would you like? What is your goals in life? What is a job? What have you been doing? What would you like to be doing? Like, all these questions. And it would probably take me 2 hours just to create the context to give an answer. But if my son, as I started, like, comes and tells me, hey, Dad, I got this offer, and probably we would just laugh, and that would be enough for him to, like, the joke was on us. Like, the offer itself was a joke. Or it would be like, wow. And the offer itself was a positive surprise. So why? Because I have full context of his trajectory, of what he's learned, of where he's going, and what he wants and what he didn't want. And probably I already know that he had applied. So all of these things would be part of the context, so that one single word or even no words would be enough as an answer. So the answer can be synthesized to the minimum expression, and you would reduce the token amount of that. because you already have full context. Now, having full context, it means that you have relevant context. I didn't search through every single memory I had of my son. When he says, I have a job offer, I have the pieces of information, I know the pieces of information that are relevant in that moment from past conversations, and probably the most recent conversations, the most relevant conversations. And what I'm actually using to assess the offer is not the offer in an absolute value, is a job offer in relation to what makes my son different to every other 25-year-old. And so basically what you're learning from people is what is the difference between that person and everyone else? And that difference is what we store. That surprise of that person, the things that make that person unique is what we store, not what makes them like everyone else. So if I'm just storing everything in memory or everything in hard drive of every single conversation I've had, 99.9% of that storage is useless for any context. It's understanding what makes those things different or unique is what makes it. So
So
basically
contextually, let me just jump in before we go to the. So on the context of AI governance, what I'm understanding, what you're saying is this is amazing because if I'm running a company, if I'm a board of these companies, in this algorithm that you guys are designing, so they will know about the company, they will know our values, our goals, the legislation of the places that we're running at, and we'll have enough context to address each one of
yes.
the issues. So is that what you're envisioning?
So basically the way we've built this is, think of it as the LLM is the CPU. We are creating the operating system around it. So we connect it to the relevant memories. We connect it to continuous learning. So we allow the LLM that doesn't learn. LLM just learns every time they have to use thousands of GPUs in parallel for months to teach an LLM. We are learning, but we're not relearning the whole LLM. We're relearning the relationship. So we call them relationships. And what we're doing is we're establishing a relationship, which is and think of it as, now you have this operating system around your LLMs, and they learn about every one of your customers. What makes them different? What things they buy? When they buy? How old are they? What do they do? What have they ever returned any product? And you can basically now know exactly when that person calls in, and you know that they just bought something 3 days ago. You can pinpoint exactly what it is that that person is calling about. And you could be proactive, you could help the person. So now that is true for a customer, it's true for an employee, it's true for a partner, it's true for an investor. Any one of those relationships the company has can be learned, and it compounds. The more you understand the differences of that person versus everyone else, the better you can relate to that person. But then it's an operating system. So we can turn around and now we know what makes you unique, and we can make the calls to the LLMs unique to match what the uniqueness that we need in the response or in the action that we are trying to trigger. So basically, we're a contextualizer. What we're doing is we're taking a stream of information, which is the Freddie calling up, and we're contextualizing that based on what we remember about the Freddie that makes him unique, and we're figuring out on the back end, we're translating that into the APIs, the agents, the LLMs, or whatever we need to call in the back end to basically deliver to you what you expect. And so it's a kind of a recursive expectation that we are trying to manage, is we have to predict what you are expecting from us. So it's a prediction of a prediction. And that prediction of a prediction is really the goal of our operating system. It's basically creating a stateful world where we know who you are, we know what you want, we know what you like, and we know how to get that in the most efficient and fastest way to you, that will be most likely correct. And when we
Excellent.
don't, we learn from that and we improve on the next place. So basically, the system, what it's doing, it's continuously learning and improving itself, and it's improving its efficiency, it's improving its speed, and it's improving the effectiveness of what we delivered to the person on the other side.
That's amazing. I'm looking forward to learning more about it. So with that as a context, I mean, you're building this intelligence. So what would you and of course I'm thinking governance, AI governance. So now I have this system that understand values and laws and what to do, how to be human centered, how to just basically honor our stakeholder, whether partners, customers, the communities we live. So with that as a context, what would you think boards should ask every time they meet with leadership in a company, given all that context, right? How do you go about taking advantage of this technology and doing it again, center on what matters the most to
Yeah. So
humans and corporations and employees
I think that
and
independently
customers?
of Context OS, which is our product at Contextful, um, what you're really trying to do in this regard is every customer is a relationship, every investor is a relationship, every employee is a relationship, and then you have relationships between your customer and in the back end your employees or your service providers, or so it's a web of relationships.
Mhm.
So what this becomes is like a router of context between
Mhm.
different entities, individuals, and services in general. So
Excellent.
so from a governance perspective, what this also allows for is a beautiful property of these contexts is that they can be nested into a hierarchy. What that means is if you and I share a passion for banana muffins,
Or
and that
AI.
is like vegan banana muffins, and then we basically have that same passion, and both have expressed that, we are kind of nested in that way. And so if I'm an employee and you're a customer and we both share that, and we can basically use that to understand better that relationship and understand what you want and what I want, and in the moment you're coming into the store, or I'm taking the AI purposely out of this, but that basically makes it a much more efficient an effective relationship. Now, if you stack those nested hierarchies on everyone that likes banana muffins with everyone that, and you have also the ability to use the same system to know what is relevant from a security perspective, from a governance perspective, from a regulatory perspective, from a privacy perspective. And so why is that important? Because part of the context of a company's risks are basically contextualizing, can we say this in an email? Can we say the banana muffin is vegan? Should we, from a regulatory perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a, do we want to do that or not? And that basically builds upon multiple layers of context of what does this company stand for? What are their applicable regulations? What are the applicable um, security or privacy issues? So I think that what if you understand that everything we've spoken about, security, privacy, regulations, and governance, are one and a single type of problem, which is context for every decision we're making, you can actually layer context in Context OS. And what that allows you to do is every time LLM call is being made through your customer service, it is actually recontextualizing. You can say anything, but you should not mention medicine. We cannot prescribe medicine, and that has because of HIPAA compliance. So if they actually ask about medicine, you should answer, but that is intercepted by the context, where that is out of context. And it's out of context because this context is what you should be talking about, because you're customer service and you
Great.
are in an unencrypted way
So
interacting.
that's a great segue. So as we're running out of time, so what would be the one message you want boards, our audience, leadership, and trustees to think about it when they think about um, our conversation today? And again, hopefully we'll have you in future shows as your new company starts evolving.
Yeah,
So what
so
is that one message you want them to think?
I think the one message is, one of the main things you have to understand is every single hallucination, every single risk, every single bad response is a lack of relevant context. And so, yes, you could try to create a super very long prompt to create your agents and test run it, or you could have a dynamic context builder that defines what is contextually relevant for each interaction. And I think that is where we're going toward. I think that that's going to be the future of AI. I think that while, and I wouldn't spend too much time, money, and effort trying to get current LLMs to work for me, because it's an impossible mission. Every context can be manipulated. But once you have a context layer that basically allows for that interaction to happen, then it will be far easier to apply LLMs and have LLMs learn about the company, learn about the world, learn about the customers, learn and start interacting and creating a lot of value. So I think that this, what we're building, I'm truly super excited about it. Like it's we've just realized that we can improve every single AI out there with this operating system that will allow them to give more relevant conversation and information and actions and to anyone who uses it. So I think that in a nutshell, I think that this will unlock a lot of the value that we've been missing out of LLMs. I think that the most important thing right now is to not overspend on things that are changing too fast. It's like building on quicksand. I think that there are fundamental technologies coming out in the next, we will be launching within probably weeks. I don't know. It's hard to say, but there's fundamental technologies that will change what is possible and that will significantly improve what you already have been testing and doing. So I think that if we can help in any way, we're open to that. The name of the new company is Contextful, so we'll be up and running probably by when you release this podcast. So we're
Awesome.
not yet there, but it's
I appreciate your passion, your consistency, your experience, and I appreciate that you bring all these things into building this new tool and launching this new tool soon. The fact that are very context center, human in the loop, optimizing for what's important for the companies, communities, investors. So you have a very holistic way to approach that. And, I love the fact that, within our conversation, we've been talking about, the same message, which is, either we govern AI or AI is going to govern us. So I like the fact that you're bringing that framework into something that could scale for companies in different segments. Again, Victor, really appreciate the time. I know you're very busy with all your engagement, and hopefully we'll have you back in the show to see how the launch goes and to learn about how it's going for you. Again, thank you so much. I
thank you so
appreciate it.
much, Freddie. Been wonderful.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of AI Governance with Dr. Freddie Seba. For more insights, be sure to subscribe and share with a friend or colleague on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube Podcasts. To learn more, visit freddieseba.com. Until next time.